college in Ohio, Marietta College in Ohio.
Okay, when you met him, he was in college
Yeah, I think he had finished 1 year.
at 22.
Yeah, I think so.
Did he in
Well,
junior
he
high
didn't
school?
go till late because he didn't have any money. So it was very late for him to start.
I see.
And he
What
also
did
had-
he done? He,
What's
well,
your
never
blue
mind.
thing?
Never mind the question.
No, behind her head.
He also had to get to
Doesn't look good in the
get
video.
jobs in school.
Uh-huh.
He found out that that was a school. I forgot where I was at.
You were dating John. and
Your
he
mother
was saying,
said that she didn't want any boys. Only wanted boys.
No.
That was
You were
way back.
15, he was 21.
He didn't want you to drink or smoke in college, and you were saying that you weren't going to change. That's the lesson.
Right,
you said.
right.
I remember.
And I went all through Cornell, never drank, never smoked, and I never met another person who didn't. In fact, a couple of years after I graduated, I found out there was a scholarship for anybody who would go through without drinking or smoking, and I wasn't even aware of that when I was there.
But you didn't need a scholarship, Mom, right?
Well, no, my parents paid for it.
Yeah, right.
The
Great.
night of my freshman year. Sometimes I was dated 6 weeks ahead of time. I counted up, I kept track of it all in a book, and I counted up the men I dated, and I paired each one of them with John. Nobody came anywhere near close to what a great person he was. So, when I graduated, I'd been a very good student besides, and I was on the dean's list, and I had offers from colleges in Paris, France, Rome, Italy, Switzerland, all over. I had wonderful offers. But I didn't want any of them. All I wanted to do was marry John. And he was in the service, and he was going to be about to come home. So I wanted to work someplace where I would get off on a minute's notice. So I worked for my family, Scheidelman's Groceries, wholesale grocers. I lived at home and I worked there. Got married 3 days after he came home.
Was it the war?
Yeah, it was the war. He was in the war. And when he came home, he was exhausted. I went over to his apartment to see him, and he's lying in bed, looking quite sick. And his mother says, "He can't get married. He's sick." I said, "He'll be all right." Got married 3 days later. So, anyways, we started off on our life.
What kind of a wedding did you have?
Well, my parents did wonderfully with the wedding. They had it outside. My mother never liked to have people inside the house because it made it all dirty and so forth. So we had it outside in the yard, and she had waiters dressed like, dressed up in night clothes. I don't know what to call it.
Tuxedo?
Formal
Tuxedo?
suits. Huh?
Tuxedo?
Yeah, she had them dressed up in tuxedos, and they served us outside there, so nobody went in the house and got anything dirty. So, it was a lovely wedding and everything. Married in St. Paul's Church in Whitesboro. I think that's the name of
That's
the church
fast
in
planning for
Whitesboro.
3 days.
Okay. And my Uncle Leon sang in the choir, and one or two of the girls that worked at Scheidelman sang in the choir. And, saw a lot of friends there and everything. So we were...
Now Natalie was there, wasn't she?
Oh yes, Natalie was one of my bridesmaids, and Alma was my sister-in-law.
Shai was already married?
I'm not positive he was married yet, but anyway, she was part of the picture, so she was one of the bridesmaids. It was great.
Speak up a little bit, Mom.
Everything went well. So John and I I said to John, we gotta get going. So I went in the house and changed my wedding dress. I had a suitcase all packed and everything ready to go. So we left and we went to, let me see, was it Schenectady? Probably Schenectady the first night. John had a hotel reserved. And we went then, and so then the next day we decided we were going to find a place at Lake George to stay for a week or so. So we started driving around. They all had these little signs on the lawn. I didn't know what they meant. No something allowed. I had no idea what it was. But anyways, we stayed at this one place called, they called them ranches. I thought they were going to have horses to ride, but they didn't have any horses. It was just a name. And there was a half a dozen other young married couples there, and the girl running it the first night, she tells us a big story. She says, you know, these people came here last night, tried to get in. She says they were Jewish. She says, I tried to talk them out of it, and she said if they'd ever gotten in, I would have put stones in their bed. So I suddenly realized this little thing on the lawns that said nothing allowed meant no Jewish people allowed. So I got up and I gave a little speech, and I said, you know, God made us all equal, and Jews are just as good as Christians, and on. And I said, she's a minister's wife. I said, you being a minister's wife. So I said, and by the way, I just wanted to tell you, yesterday my name was Scheitelman. So a lot of people thought that was Jewish. So we looked every night in our bed to see if she put stones in there, but she never did. And we stayed there a week, but then we went on. I remember going in the sort of like a bookstore there. John and I decided we wanted to learn bridge on our honeymoon, so we bought a book on bridge, and we tried to work on that alone in our little place. Well, then after we stayed there a week, we started up north. We didn't really know where we're going, just kept going, and every town we would stop in, and John would get the newspaper and see what they had for ads for work. And he always wanted to be an engineer. He never could afford being an engineer when he was at Marietta College, which was just a liberal arts college. They didn't have any mechanical courses at all. So he didn't have any background, but one time he asked the professor, can't you teach just one course? And John had 7 jobs while he was going through school to pay his way. And he just really had to work so hard. He never had time for anything else. But he asked this one professor, can't you have a course? So he says, if you get all the materials, I'll teach the course. So in addition to his 7 jobs, he got material for the course, and they had the one course there, and they had it on his diploma that he arranged one course of it. And that was the only plus he had on when he was applying for all these jobs. They say, you haven't any engineering, you've only got the one course that you planned. So anyways, we just kept going. In the meantime, I remember.
There you go, your water, Mom.
Yeah. John's mother had said to me, he hates fish. Don't ever serve him any fish.
Have a little more water.
It's like,
Voice is strong.
So when we got to Boston, I said, we're going into Boston. And I ordered clam chowder, and I ordered shrimp cocktail, and I ordered every kind of seafood I could think of. And he loved it all. So that was the end of his not liking fish. So anyways, we kept going. We finally got to Syracuse. There was a job available in Birhtday, I think that was the name of it. It's an air conditioning place.
Carrier.
It's an air conditioning place, but the job was for a plumber. So John applied for that, and they said, well, we have a testing program. You have to take this test, come back in a week, and we'll see if you're fitted for the job and so forth. So I took the test in a week. Somebody met him. The guy who made the test met him and said he had the highest mark that anybody ever had taking this test. And it wasn't perfect, and if it had been perfect, he would have had to make the test over. So he says, you're not going to be a plumber. You got too much of a brain for that. You're going to be an air conditioning engineer. So that's what he always wanted to be, and he had no idea the engineering tools or anything. So they started him out. They said, a fellow from Japan isn't coming tomorrow, and you've got a place. Start the course tomorrow. So he went through the school there. He had the job, and he had a very high IQ, so that's why he got this job. So that worked out very well. In the meantime, I'd been like George. I was throwing up all the time. And we'd go out and have dinner, and I have to go out and I have to throw it up. And it's terrible. So I said, I've never had this before. I never know what it's about. So I finally went to the doctor. And they figured out that I was pregnant. So
On your
we got
honeymoon?
that worked out. Just have tiny, tiny meals, and then I wasn't throwing up anymore. So, had the baby naturally. Didn't have any,
Drugs.
what?
No drugs.
Didn't have any drugs or anything, right?
No C-section.
Yeah. So we had a ugly little apartment in Syracuse. It was very hard to find anything decent. Anyways, we did that, and then after we were there, well, we went to Utica, and funny thing was, when John was working for Carrier, he also worked in Utica at Art Hahn's place. Remember the Hahn family? Do you remember
Yeah.
that? Gloria and Eleanor Hahn and her father and so forth. Anyways, he's pretty well off. So he had air conditioning. So my father thought he was doing John a big favor, and he bought out Art Hahn's air conditioning. Well, John told me, he didn't tell my father, that all the equipment that Art Hahn had was very much out of date. And that was a terrible expense for John. He had to get a warehouse first, and rent that, and take care of all this equipment stuff. And when people wanted to buy something, they were older things, and they didn't want those. They wanted new models. So the business did not work out well. John's mother was doing the bookkeeping.
What was the name of it? Do you remember?
Let me think.
It wasn't Governed Air, right?
No, it wasn't Birhtday. I don't think so.
Well, anyway, that's okay.
Anyways, that didn't work out. It went into bankruptcy, actually. So, then he had to do something else. I don't know how it went from there. Seems as though, I guess that's when we got into the building business.
I thought he worked direct for Carrier for a little while.
Yeah, did for
Yeah.
Governor Dare.
I
Before Governor Dare.
remember that he exactly worked for Carrier. So, anyways, we got into
So you said
home
welding.
building.
Oh,
Got into home building, and that worked out pretty well as far as I can remember. Trying to think what on from there. I can't remember anything
so
else.
part of, but yeah, I think you skipped Governor Dare because he had Governor Dare after the business Grandpa bought went bankrupt. Then he started another air conditioning business, right?
Down on Columbia Street.
I honestly don't.
Governed
remember.
Air.
Yeah, Governed Air. Yeah.
And that's when Grandma was the bookkeeper.
Maybe.
On
maybe.
Columbia
And
Street.
Jay worked for him and I worked for him.
Oh, you worked there too?
Yeah, I did the bookkeeping with Grandma.
Oh. Well, that part's a little foggy.
That was a pretty long time, but that was, Grandpa didn't own that though.
Okay, well, I honestly don't know or remember.
Okay, well that's okay, Mom.
Remember that too well.
Okay.
I'm glad you told me you worked there, because I didn't remember that.
So then he got into building.
Okay, yes, it was
Arbor
after
Home.
that.
He sold Arbor Homes.
What's that?
He sold Arbor Homes.
Yes, that's true, he did sell Arbor.
And he also worked for U.S. Steel.
Yeah.
Go on with the story, Mom.
Okay, so, let's see, I think we lived on, Root Street first, maybe?
Yeah, well first it was Arlington Terrace,
Arlington Terrace, that's right.
and then you moved to Root Street.
And then to Root Street, then after a while, the house burned down.
Right.
And then, I remember John was working in New York at the time. Well, he was going back and forth like weekend.
Right.
I remember calling him and telling him the house was on fire. And I said, Gloria D was taking me around to look at houses, and this house would have a door hanging off the cupboard, and this one would then. They all had some problems, and I just couldn't bear working in a house, moving into a house that's got its own problems. So I told John that, and he says, well, just take anything for now, because I'm gonna build you the house in Puerto Rico someday. That was our big dream. We were gonna live in Puerto Rico, and he was gonna build a house there. Never happened.
Thank God.
It was our dream all the time. So, Thomas is giving some signals here.
It's okay, Mom.
So, anyways, we found the house up on,
Gilbert.
What was the street we lived on?
Gilbert Road.
Gilbert Road.
Didn't you live in a hotel for a year though?
Yes, we were in a hotel,
For a
and we
year.
also lived in, Carol's had us live in, their mother's house while she was in Florida.
Uh-huh.
I remember I bought slippers for everybody because she had all, Oriental rugs, and then I bought towels. So we'd use our own towels, and I bought sheets, so we bought our own sheets. And then, went to the camp to live for a while, and I brought a whole carload of stuff that had been damaged in the fire, and I was going to try to fix up while I was at camp. And Marietta says to me, Mother, if you send all that stuff back, she says, and sit down by the water for the summer and just read the Bible, she says, I'll do all the housework and the cooking and the washing and everything, so that you don't have to do anything all summer long. So I sent the whole bunch of stuff back, and she did that. She was only about,
You were at Old Forge, right?
yeah, at Old Fort. She was probably only about 9 or 10, but she did everything. She did all the cooking, and I don't know how she managed it all, but she did the washing and the cleaning and the whole bit. And I sat down by the lake and I read through the Bible 3 times.
Wow.
You know, that's maybe as far as I can remember.
Good story.
But we could take a 5-minute break.
Years